Hello and welcome to ComScience Simplified. In today's video, we look into the Next.js framework and see why it has been creating huge ripples in the world of web development recently. As stated in the description on the landing page, Next.js is a React framework. But the real deal that separates it from most of the other frameworks is the support for static as well as server-side rendering straight out of the box. That stuff is game-changing. So what's this server-side rendering, you ask? Good question. Let's try and understand. In order to understand how server-side rendering works, let us first see how a non-server-side rendered application works. Usually, there is some code that looks like this. Using a query selector, we grab reference of a div with an ID of root. And then, ReactDOM.render will render the entire application into that division. This is what the whole process looks like. As soon as we visit the URL for the application, a network request is made to fetch the application from the server. As a response to the request, the server returns the HTML, CSS and JavaScript bundles. Once the bundles are received, they are unpacked, and when the JavaScript gets executed, the lines of code that we earlier saw gets executed and the corresponding React UI gets injected into the DOM. As this entire process of rendering the UI takes place at the browser, the client, hence we call it client-side rendering. Now that client-side rendering is clear, you might be wondering how server-side rendering differs from this. Let's explore. In server-side rendering, instead of sending the bundle back and letting the browser render the UI, the server performs certain additional steps, which might include executing JavaScript code, making some network requests, etc. At the end of the process, the server generates the final HTML that the browser can directly use. Once that HTML is displayed on the browser, the usual steps of JavaScript execution take place and the UI starts responding to user events too. This process is called as hydration. Once hydration is complete, the app then continues to function similar to a normal SPA. But in this case, as majority of the tasks related to rendering took place on the server and hence the name, server-side rendering. The next logical question that you might ask is, how does Next.js help in rendering the UI server-side? Before that, if this video helped you understand server-side rendering a little better, make sure to convey the same to YouTube by smashing that like button. Moving on. Next.js provides certain provisions which ease the process. For instance, while defining the React component, if we also define a function called getStaticProps, that React component gets rendered at build time, that is, when the application is being deployed. Similarly, if instead of getStaticProps, we define a function called getServerSideProps, Next.js automatically understands that the particular React component needs to be rendered on the server side whenever any request for that component is made from the browser. It's as simple as that. We will get into more details around this in future videos when we actually build something using Next.js and introduce these concepts step by step. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss that update. Also, let me know in the comments section if you have ever worked with server-side rendering before Next.js simplified it for us. If you did, I feel your pain. In addition to all that server-side rendering stuff, what other things does Next.js simplify for us? Well, routing is made easy for us because the routes are auto-generated based on the folder structure. Inside the pages directory, index.js corresponds to the base route. If we create a file called users.js in the pages folder, it will be loaded for the /users route. Similarly, if we create a folder called blogs and then create a file called first.js, that will correspond to the /blog/first route. And that is how straightforward a file system-based routing is. In addition to that, Next.js automatically optimizes all images by converting them to a more optimized WebP format and also bringing in lazy loading. Also, we get TypeScript support, as well as Sass support right out of the box, so that's another plus point. With all those benefits, it seems like a good time to get into Next.js and give it a try. If you don't know where to begin, I am planning to start a video series soon, so keep an eye on that. With that, it's time to wrap up today's video. Hope it provided you some value. See you in the next one. Until then, happy coding.